okay, now we have a story. Until we got them to the point where they were like, what is this vision of what we're trying to do? And so we had to pull in marketing and the CEO to really help understand what are they pitching to investors? How are they talking about this? Before we could touch, and we ended up never going back to that list of Jira tickets. And so you have to have that strategy. And sometimes people are looking for a roadmap because there is no strategy.
Welcome everybody to the Talking Roadmaps channel. My name's Justin Woods and I'm one of the co-hosts here. And today I'm joined by Grant Hunter from Product Growth Leaders. Grant, it's great to have you here. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Justin, for having me. As you said, my name's Grant Hunter and I'm a co-founder and partner at Product Growth Leaders. I founded it with Steve Johnson, who many people know has been on your show before with Phil, I believe. I come from a long background. Actually, I called myself an accidental product management person, although coming out of grad school, I think product was a place I wanted to get to. I started in market research, moved into alliances and partnerships, and in marketing. And then I was doing product management with marketing title, and somebody probably said, hey, let's make you director of product management. So my first title ever was director of product management, but it was always on the strategic and business side in the B2B space, middle market enterprise, where sort of I've cut my teeth, as they say.
Yeah, I think that's where I've known you from as well, Grant, from that kind of area, B2B product management.
Took a while to become a full-time coach, instructor, advisor. But Steve and I have been doing Product Growth Leaders now, 3 full years, and really focused on helping companies get better at product management, product success on purpose, right? Let's make sure we're doing it intentionally. And so that's what we're focused on, very much in a fish with you while helping you fish. Build capabilities and get stuff done. And that's sort of the focus of what we're looking at.
If you're enjoying the channel, subscribe, hit the bell icon and give us a like. Grant and I have already had a chin wag beforehand, before today's session, and we're really looking forward to this today. So Grant, it's great to have you on board. So Grant, great to be with you. Let's get stuck into the first questions, which I guess is, what do you think the purpose of a roadmap is?
There's 2 words that always come to my mind are to help with clarity and alignment, right? So clarity, let's make sure that we're clear about what we're trying to do. And yeah, I think it was Jana Basto who said, a prototype of your strategy. And I think that, as I see it, as I've experienced it, too often when people struggle with roadmaps, because they really don't have a strategy. And so the roadmap becomes a ability for us to start getting clarity on the strategy, but also on sort of where we're expecting to go. But then once you have that clarity, it helps drive alignment, right? This is now internally, at least, we're trying to drive alignment and where we're going. That being said, for B2B enterprise customers and middle market customers, if they're making a commitment to you, to your company, to your product, this is a 3-5+ year commitment. And so they need some clarity and alignment as well as to where are we going, making sure there's our vision, our direction is aligned with them and their vision and direction to make sure that they're getting on the right bus. The product is aligned with where they're thinking they're going to go. And I think so both internally and externally, it helps provide clarity and alignment.
Yeah, I love that. And you mentioned, of course, from the B2B space, I think there's a massive difference in terms of how road mapping might work in the B2B space versus the B2C space. And I'm looking forward to kind of bringing some of your expertise there. But yeah, the clarity and alignment, totally agree. And so if the roadmap is about clarity and alignment, who do you think the audience should be of that roadmap?
There is multiple audiences. So we talked about internal and external. So there is a public roadmap. The public, I'll start there because I think it's easier to find that. It's potential customers, right? So they can see it. And within that's going to be the functional buyer who's looking at, is it solving the problems I want, but also a technical or compliance-based buyer who's looking at, is there, tech stack, is where they're going, aligning with where we go. It's a cloud or it's prem, it's AWS versus Azure or whatever it may be. They've got 2-factor authentication. I talked with a client earlier who is in the healthcare pharma logistics space, and they're like, all of a sudden 2-factor authentication went from a nice to have to a have to have because of everything that's happening with Change Healthcare. So we have those audiences buyer. There's also partnerships, right? If we have true good partnerships that we're engaging with, we're integrating with, they need to have some understanding of how a roadmap impacts them, where it's going, and that type of stuff. So externally, I'd say those are the, some would say analysts as well. And maybe if you're filing to go public, or if you're a public company, there's going to be some interest in where that roadmap goes. But to me, it's aligned with the customer, because if we have the customer aligned, clear on what that roadmap is and the value they'll get from it, I think that's what really the Wall Street or investment bank type people, City of London people would need to know. Internally, the audience should be all of your collaborating peers, right? You have the senior leadership team, because you're painting a vision to them of, here's our plan, here's where we're going, this is how we're going to execute on your strategy. And the reality is, product management is where strategy meets execution. We're sort of that connecting bridge for it. So we need to make sure leadership is clear. That we understood their strategy, but also that our roadmap, our plan for executing on that is aligned, and we got alignment and clarity there. Then, it just going upstream and downstream, you've got design and development. We're aligned with them, and they should be part of. I like product management to own the roadmap, but I've facilitated sessions where I needed engineering and design in there, because we can't do this before we do that, and that helps build it. So they're going to be a key contributor to it. But once we have that alignment with them, and then it's now into marketing and sales, it's into support and services and consulting, depending on what your ecosystem is, the leadership has to be prepared. This is a way for us to get people to know what's coming, so they're not surprised. Steve's working with a client now who it's like a launch happens, and they're like, people are like, I didn't know this was coming. And it's like, it would be nice if we are on all same team, we'd actually communicate and work together. And a roadmap is it's not too granular. I think sometimes when it gets too granular, it loses, and if it gets too high in the sky, it's sort of a Goldilocks. It needs to be just right at that right level.
It does. Gosh, there's so much that you shared there that resonated with me. What I want to unpack. There was one term that you mentioned, which is all of the collaborating peers, and I thought that was such a lovely sentence to summarize the fact that this is a group effort, even though potentially it's owned by one team or maintained by one team. It really is jointly owned. Another bit that you mentioned was around customers, partners, analysts, investors, and I think that's one thing that is quite often forgotten, especially in early stage B2B startups or even any startup looking for investment, is that a lot of investors are going to look at that as an indication of where they're planning on going. And is that a good fit for investment? Is that something that people want to get behind? And so, Grant, I'm really grateful for you bringing that up, because I think that's one thing that often is forgotten. An external roadmap is not just about your customers. It can be about analysts and investors as well.
And I remember somebody teaching me once when I was in product management, the two axes of the Gartner score blocker, the magic quadrant. One is completeness of vision. One is ability to execute. And what they do is they, over the years, we presented them roadmaps, and they're going to judge, do they think the roadmap aligns with what they think the future is? That's where your completeness vision. The ability to execute is they're going to go back and look at those roadmaps you presented to them and see, did you deliver on it? That's how your ability to execute is. So it's not just the investor analysts, it is the Gartners, Forresters, those types of people who are, a key partner in this ability to get to market, right? And again, one thing I wanted to say on the collaborating peers, the word stakeholder is getting so abused, and nobody knows what it is. And so I've stopped using stakeholders for your internal, and I like collaborating partners or collaborating peers, because it really gets to this fact that it's a team sport. It's that we need to be in this together.
It does, yeah, absolutely. And I have seen that word stakeholder being used for anybody that has a stake. And kind of like, again, I think collaborating peers is a much nicer term for it. So Grant, I might steal that one going forwards, if that's okay. One thing that you again, I wanted to pick up on was you talked about this pie in the sky strategy. And sometimes it's so nebulous that we really struggle to kind of bring it down and make a roadmap out of it. I've certainly found that with some of my clients I've been working with. They've gone and worked with the consultants. They've been sold the dream. There's all of these different terms. And then they're struggling to go, well, how do we take these 7 pillars and actually create something actionable against them? And I'm wondering, in your experience, What is the relationship of a roadmap to some of those strategic things like vision, strategy, objectives? How does that fit in, do you feel?
Good strategy, bad strategy is one of my guiding, by Rommel is one of my guiding things when I think about strategy, as with Playing to Win by Roger Martin. But what in good strategy, bad strategy, Rommel has his kernel. What are the 3 keys to a good strategy? You need to have a current situation diagnosis. You have to have a guiding policy. And that's really where the mission type stuff comes in, boundary setting. And then you need to have a coherent set of actions. And to me, the roadmap is that coherent set of actions. And, there's going to be the nearer term actions, which are things that we know we're going to do next, but, or we're working on now. Then there's stuff that's next. Based on everything we know in that current situation, based on those guiding principles, we now have it. Okay, based on everything there, here's our coherent set of actions. And it may be more detailed at an initiative level or near term, next quarter, next task. But further out, it's more portfolio level, different problems, different markets, different, that type of stuff. And so for me, this is where we help connect it, because if we're painting an end state, right, where we're trying to get to, whether it's with a company or with a portfolio or division or with a product itself, we really need to start with the end in mind and bring in where we're going and have a decent ability to communicate what that is. And then the roadmap just becomes the plan to get from point A to point B in the places in between. And so I think to me, it falls into that coherent action plan that we're trying to do.
Yeah, exactly. I think, again, that fits with what I've seen. Often kind of a poor strategy leads to a poor roadmap. For some people I've worked with, the roadmap is seen as their strategy. And I think you and I can see where there's massive problems lying there as well, in that your roadmap is not your strategy. In fact, Saeed Khan talks about the roadmap being an output from strategy. And I think that's the right way of looking at things as well.
I had a client I was working with a few years ago, and they came to me saying, we owe the board a roadmap. They didn't say strategy, said we owe the board a roadmap. And the VP of product went and took a product meeting, of course, thinking that would answer it for them. And they came back probably even more confused about what to do than ever. And so they brought me in. And often we work with people that's in that, as I said earlier, we, fishing with you while we teach you to fish. And my first day in their office, I come in and they had a war room set up with every JIRA ticket printed out. And this is how they were trying to build a roadmap from the bottom up. We have all these tickets. How do we organize them? And I said, wait a second, let's go back. Talk to me about what do you guys do as a company? There were, an integrated solution, hardware, software, networking type stuff. It was a pretty comprehensive solution, but I'm like, okay, what does all this do? What is it? Oh, it helps with safety and helps with productivity. Okay, now we have a story. Until we got them to the point where they were like, what is this vision of what we're trying to do? And so we had to pull in marketing and the CEO to really help understand what are they pitching to investors? How are they talking about this? Before we could touch, and we ended up never going back to that list of JIRA tickets. And so you have to have that strategy. And sometimes people are looking for a roadmap because there is no strategy. And that's a term that they think is, to our point, we've talked about it. As Saeed says, it's the output of the strategy. As Jana said, it's a prototype of the strategy. It's not the strategy itself. It's a byproduct. But
as you know, Grant, and I think we can empathize with a lot of people, and I've been there myself, that scenario that you just painted is very familiar, especially when you come in and there isn't a robust product management function, or product management wasn't done quite the right way, or a startup is growing and you're the first in to take over from the CEO as a product management function. Often you're faced with that backlog of JIRA ticket items, and the best thing you could do is maybe some affinity mapping to look at the common denominators and boil them up. But like you said, the right thing actually is that in order to prioritize your backlog, the first thing to do is see which of those align towards your strategy. That's the best way to do it. But often that is the missing part. And I've actually found that I brought a road mapping tool into a previous organization as a way of being able to demonstrate that I needed to have a product management strategy, but there wasn't a company level strategy for me to tie into. It was like, I will do what I think is best, but I actually wanted to use it as a lever to demonstrate there was a gap.
The roadmap, as we said, it's a clarity and alignment tool, and we need to get there. And it's a critical thing to make sure that we're aligned. And you talked about strategy alignment in those buckets, and I've done the affinity map bottoms up. And actually, where I've seen that work the best is in a platform roadmap. So I was working with a large company with multiple divisions who was trying to build a platform to sort of do the heavy lifting of the 60, 70, 80% single sign-on, right? API, whatever it may be. So they actually rolled up all the roadmaps from all of their divisions to start looking at, okay, where are there similar things across all these products? Okay, let's do identity access once, right? Let's do content caching once, right? Let's do some of these things so everybody gets it the same way. And then the platform will provide that lift. That's where we can get some of the efficiencies of scale. But in that case, you really needed to do it because it's not really the external strategy of where we're trying to go. It's more of the execution of how do we deliver it in the most efficient way. And that's where I think it can work out that way. But even that way, it was not at a Jira ticket level. It was more probably at an Epic level type thing. So
yeah, I think it has to be at that level. Otherwise, if you've got a backlog of 1,000 Jira tickets, that's not the way to start. I think it needs to almost be. I think there is a bit of bottom up and top down, but it's predominantly got to be. It's got to be top down from that perspective.
The bottom up for us is back to the bottom up for us was once we had this construct, and we talked about it in our previous conversation. I always build this product stack, right? It always had at least 3 layers to it. I mean, this is a product management person working in PowerPoint. So the 3 layers were a rectangle layer, which was data or content layer, a rectangle, which was application layer, tended to be the biggest one, and a rectangle that was interface layer, which would have your user interface, but APIs and other integrations, that type of stuff. And within the application, we would start identifying what problems are we solving. So in that situation, inside that application layer, there was a layer that was productivity and there was a layer that was safety, right? Okay, within safety, what are those things that we're trying to solve? Oh, personal safety, vehicle safety, environmental safety, whatever these may be. Well, we start building out if we build out our full vision to what we think gets our SAM and TAM being the same, right? We've done everything. We've got every feature in there we think right now. Here's what it looks like. Then to figure out how do we get from where we are now to there, that's where we start like getting into more of the bottom up type stuff. Okay, well, we can't deliver on this thing until we have this thing. So let's start it's getting design, engineering in a room and really, putting a timeline out there, okay? And putting Post-it notes on this before this and drawing lines. And that's how, and now all of a sudden, what we did in that, I call it a visual roadmap using the product platform. You build the strategy, you communicate the strategy that we're executing against. You communicate the vision of what in 3 years or 5 years the end state looks like, finished looks like. And then you do deletes, right? You copy, delete, okay? And so what do we have now? Let's delete everything that we don't have now. And now we have, okay, here's where we're at today. Okay, what are we putting back in? What are we doing next half? What are we doing next year? And all of a sudden, instead of being a column-based, now, next, later, it's actually a visual thing. And I found that, board members and salespeople were able to understand it better. Because once you've painted that in a now, next, later roadmap, you're never showing what that end state is. It's sort of, you're built to it. So this it's a unique way that I've been using ever since I was a product manager to start communicating what's in my head as to where are we trying to get to and what are those, based on everything we know, what are the steps to get there?
Very much so. And I think what you've touched on there is the importance of sequencing sometimes, and that these things have to have some form of order. We might not even call them hard dependencies as such, or dependencies, but there is a sequence, a logical order. And I think that's more the case when you get down working with your collaborative peers on saying, look, what do we think we can achieve? And then it's the next level down from that. I think at some levels we do want to keep things more in a now, next, later approach, or something that's a bit more oriented around problems to solve. But arguably, there's a level and a discipline of road mapping that is going to be more visual, more timing, not visual as such, but more time-based, more sequenced. And I think that is absolutely important as well.
What I've seen is the more business-oriented the audience, the more the visual in the higher level makes sense. It's the conversation with those collaboration peers and how we're going to execute against this that makes sense. The board, if you start getting too deep into the weeds with a board, most of these people, I've done a lot of private equity or VC board meetings, and they understand the finances, right? They understand that. They might understand sales because they get that. And so the higher level the story, painting the vision, where we're going to go. It wasn't just technical requirements, what are prerequisites and stuff. It was contractual. Hey, that we know this big customer is coming up for renewal in 2 years. We know this is the number one thing on the list. The head of sales is going to be very happy that that feature for that major renewal is before that renewal comes in, or there's an industry standard coming out, a compliance related thing. So we also mark those when we were building that timeline. We marked each of those industry client type things, and it helps you make decisions because sometimes it's in my roadmap. I didn't have it until 2 years out, but we've got a major deal that they want it. Yeah, let's bring it forward. We could do that. And that's the negotiation you do.
It is. And I think, it's, I know some people are against having dates on the roadmap, but I think everything, it's just, it has to have a place sometimes. When I was a product manager at Dell, I looked after the e-commerce basket for EMEA. So 16 different countries. I had to have things on my roadmap with dates, such as the Switch Maestro changeover from one payment type to another one. If we missed it and we didn't support it, it was a big deal. There were other ones around key government legislation dates that we had to have on there. And I think those things are okay. What isn't okay is we play the roadmap Tetris and try to fit everything in and put a timeline on it. That's where it doesn't become right. So it's great to see that you've addressed that balance, because dates on our roadmaps can very much be important for alignment.
And depending on your industry, I did a lot of work in the supply chain for retail and consumer goods, the EAN, GS1 standards. And it's like, these people are like, yeah, you have to have everything ready to go by August if you're doing, or actually by June if you're doing back to school, just to get it into the stores for back to school, right? If Christmas is a day, if there's a major conference in your industry, right? It does have to be part.
Grant, I love these stories and that you're weaving your experiences into the today's chat. It's brilliant. Thank you. Grant, I'd love to talk a little bit about what you believe some of the key elements or content of a roadmap should be. And we've already talked about this. Maybe there's different levels, but maybe you could elaborate on what you feel some of the key elements or content of a roadmap should be.
Again, we've talked about different levels. So I think at the most granular level, it's got to be a problem to solve and who we're solving it for, a persona and market segment. Internally, I was working with a client this morning before we did this call, and they've realized that their UX is bad. In the more of their product company consumes, the harder it gets for them to navigate. And so that's not a market problem we're solving. Yeah, it's their own problem. It was probably tech debt. I'll call it tech debt because they probably took some shortcuts when they built it UX wise. Sometimes, yeah. And so sometimes we're going to put things on there. The problem we're solving is we're migrating to the cloud. We're doing something else. But we have to identify that problem we're solving. It could be a platform problem. It could be we're moving databases or something like that. So it could, or more often than not, it should be a externally focused. Here's the problem we're solving for the market. It could be a compliance thing. But if we get to that granular level, I tend to like it on an epic level, to get down to an epic level, right? Sometimes, depending on how comprehensive the solutions and enterprise solutions, an epic level may be getting down. I may not show, I talked about the visual roadmap. I may not show that epic on the full vision, but it's here are the epics we're delivering within this sub box of safety of the person. And, when we get there. So you have to have that epic level. And the reality is most of those JIRA tickets I read are not even epic level. And so we need to get the epic level, but I think it also goes to these themes, right? Okay, this fits within safety and safety for the person. And so now we're tying it back to thematic elements. And so we can be doing, we're going from being North American based to moving into Europe. So those themes, market segments and problems to solve, whether those are external or internal, the market segment being internally, we're trying to solve some of our own issues. But I think those are the things. And then you have some level of time grading. right? And I like to put, if there are time elements, a major compliance event in the EU, a major trade show, you guys, you're going to Pack Expo and you need to, well, that should be in there because that's got to be driving stuff. I guarantee you, Apple has the Worldwide Developers Conference as a date on their calendar for the roadmaps in sometime in late September.
You'd hope so, Grant. They're telling us about it all the time. So if they don't have it internally, there's some big problems.
Yeah. So, but those are things. So we need to have those elements to understand. It's also at a different level of how we're doing this, right? There's different things I'm going to communicate to a head of finance or the leadership team. And so, again, as we talked earlier, I'm going to be at a higher level of that. It's going to be tying it to the strategy, where when I'm talking with engineering and stuff, it's going to be at as low a level as possible to talk about it and thinking about platform decisions they have to make. Talking about, hey, we don't think we're going to get to this until 2 years from now, but be aware that we think we need to get here because that may change how you do something now.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so important for that. And again, communication, alignment, expectation management, it is so vital. So thank you for sharing some of those ways that you like to visualize and style. I think you're right. It depends on the different flight levels that you are, or like you said, the stack. Do you have any tools that you use that you prefer for managing and visualizing a roadmap? And we mentioned good old PowerPoint there, right?
When I was doing this, 20 some years ago, there weren't tools like AHA and ProudPlan and ProdPad and all those types of things. So, you may do with Excel and PowerPoint. And so in the visualization of it, I haven't worked enough with those tools to see how they allow you to do visualization. So I wouldn't want to talk to it. Now Miro is a place that, easier to collaborate on Miro with your peers than it is PowerPoint, right? I can do the exact same thing in Miro that I could do. And I'm not getting into a Figma level thing where I'm wireframing stuff. This is pre-wireframe, right? This is really strategy of the product and vision of the product and just looking at what are the buckets that we're trying to get to. So to me, anything that's got circles and squares and rectangles and triangles that I can, in coloring, so I can, use different color code things. That's where I do this. And really it all comes back to who's the audience for this, right? It's easier in a tool like AHA or whatever that you can integrate with Jira to when you're talking with design and engineering who lives in those worlds. Let's talk to that type of stuff. When's the last time you were at a board meeting? Every time you're at a board meeting, what is the main thing being used to communicate? If you're talking strategy, if you're trying to sell this, if you're in a sales presentation trying to share with a client, PowerPoint. So, yes, there are these great tools, but if we're going to talk about clarity and alignment, we need to then also be able to present that story. It's part of that storytelling that we can get into.
I'm so happy you said that because actually I feel the same, and that might surprise folks in the audience from my background as an AHA expert and a roadmap tooling expert. But I truly believe that these tools are great for managing your roadmaps and potentially presenting your roadmaps as well in the absence of something. But ultimately, you've got to meet your stakeholders, your collaborating peers, wherever they are in the systems that they use. And I remember, I think it was chatting with Holly Donahue actually a while back, who's a CPO at Purple, talking about actually that where she found the most roadmap traction was to create roadmap artifacts and put it in the places where her stakeholders or collaborating peers actually were on the day-to-day. Because if you say, oh, hey, go to this URL and it will create this presentation for you and here's the roadmap. I mean, if a roadmap never gets looked at, is it truly a roadmap? And it kind of misses the point. So, Grant, I'm really glad you said that. I think I agree. Talk to me a little bit about a best practice in road mapping. What do you think is a really good practice?
For me, I think the best practice in road mapping is actually doing the strategy work first. And we talked about it's an output of, it's a prototype of. If you don't clearly have your strategy, how do you make those trade-off decisions? How do you decide what's on it? And so I've worked with a lot of clients who didn't have a product strategy. We had to do that first, but B, didn't have a corporate strategy. And so even in that situation, what I do is I work with them to create an assumptive strategy. So based on what they say, what they talk about, what they prioritize, you can sort of start back of the napkin out what you think the strategy is from the corp. You can build that guiding policy as Ramit will talk about from a corporate level, in actually, when you then present your product strategy and roadmap, alignment and clarity, right? Based on what I hear, what I see, here's the corporate strategy that I'm working from. And if this is, let's talk through this. Let's get alignment and clarity on it. And once you have that, okay, based on that, here is our strategy. Based on that, here's our roadmap. Again, the roadmap is the byproduct that comes after that. And so the best practice is you have to have clarity and alignment on the corporate strategy and on the product strategy before you can do a roadmap.
Yeah, that's so true. So actually, if folks out there are really struggling with your roadmaps in terms of what to put or what it should show, start to think about, well, if the roadmap is the steps of the execution of your strategy, or like you said, the prototype of or the output from, if you're struggling with that, actually it's time to take a step back and think, actually, what is our product strategy, or even, as I've mentioned previously, what is our company strategy to this? And then actually start to focus on that first. Because otherwise, if we don't have the direction, we could be taking steps in completely the wrong place.
And then it's also realizing that there's multiple types of roadmaps, right? There's a portfolio level roadmap I like to look at, which is really looking at an in-house matrix type view of things. What are the markets and segments, and what are the problems we're solving, right? And this is thinking more portfolio division company wide, where do we go from here? Now, some of those adjacent segments and personas may be product extension into that, but some of them are going to be new products you need to build. And, how do you find your ways it's easier to move into something that already knows you. I was working with a client and they had a product that was in one specific industry for compliance. They had a really good idea using the exact same 80% of the same platform for a new product for a different industry. And they wanted to go right into it. I said, no. I said, does your current industry have a similar problem? Oh, yeah, they do. I'm like, okay, first let's solve that problem for your current industry. Right now you're moving from problem A to problem B. And now problem B, it's easier to go into market 2 if you already have problem B addressed somewhere else with some references of clients that they might identify. And so at a portfolio level, you need to understand these things. And part of the road mapping is having those conversations, building a grid, right, at a portfolio level of market segments and problems to solve. And where are we now? I always make that green. And then it's like, okay, where can we go? In logically, what makes sense? If you think of Ansop's matrix, the growth strategy matrix, some people call it. So existing in new markets, existing in new products, existing in market penetration, that's good. The better you can grow within there first, that's going to be higher success rates. As soon as you move into a new market or a new product or a new problem to solve, you're putting more risk into the equation. But the lower right-hand corner is diversification, new. That's the hardest. So if you're going to build a new product for a new market, that becomes a little more risky. Can you find a path that can get you there a little better? Can you take your current product into that market first, just to establish yourself? Or can you solve that new problem for your existing market before you move into the next one? And these are conversations. And then you're also looking at the landscape of who's the competitors, what's the penetration rate. There's a whole bunch of stuff we go into, all about building out this portfolio. And then within that, we can get down to what we talked about with that one client. It's like, what is this product? What is a complete whole product, as Jeffrey Moore would call it? What does the whole product look like? What is included in it? And now tell that story of how within this market and problem sector, what does complete look like? What does the whole product look like? And how do we get there? And so different levels of advocacy, add that to the platform roadmap we talked about earlier. So I look at least 3, depending on how big you are. If you only have one product, your product roadmap is there, right? But as soon as you start scaling and moving into new products and new problem and new markets, you need to think portfolio level. And when you're doing that, you start thinking platform level too, because it's like, okay, I've got multiple problems to solve. What can I do similar across them?
There was a ton of value in there, Grant. Thank you for that. I think it's so important, again, to take a step back from these and think and look about the whole landscape around marketing and strategy, because all of that ultimately does shape your roadmap. I wonder if there's a pet hate that you just really don't like to see on the roadmap, Grant. What do you see on there? You just go, let's just get rid of that bit. I don't like it.
To me, there's nothing specific. There's nothing general that I see all the time, right? The biggest pet is that it's feature-based and technology-based, not problem and market-based. Or an extension of that, the biggest pet peeve is people who say they have a 6-month roadmap. That's all it is. Because in that case, it's a release plan. It's not a roadmap. And so I think maybe I do have a big pet peeve. The big pet peeve is people not realizing the roadmap is a strategy output, a strategy document, not a tactical. And we did a benchmark with somebody, and the majority of respondents said that their roadmap was 1 year or less. And yes, I know you're agile, and I know, but especially in B2B enterprise, maybe in B2C that could work a little better, but in B2B enterprise, where contract lengths are 3-5 years and contract values are 7 figures plus, if you can only tell, I was working with a client who worked in the fintech sector, and one group worked with banks, and one group was internet, point solution type stuff. And we asked the question, there's a roadmap session we were talking about, like, okay, what level of confidence do you have to have second half year 2? And the big course type stuff said 99.9%, because the banks have to be planning their schedule. They have to be, it's like building a rocket to go to the moon. There's no compliance wise, they have to be ready for it. They have to be planning for it. Big change management, because it's the systems that run the bank. Where the internet people are like, we're not 99% second quarter, right? And so you need to understand that in an enterprise space, the bigger the client is, the bigger the contract is, the further visibility they need to have out. This really needs to allow with the strategy.
You mentioned about WWDC and Apple, and I'm quite an Apple user myself, and I was looking ahead at some of the Mac rumors sites around, when's the next iPad coming out? When are we going to get foldable iPhones and things like that? And what was actually the segue into the roadmaps is that Apple, from a supply chain perspective, has to have a roadmap with its suppliers to say, hey, in 2027, 2028, we need a flexible display. Or in that time, we need a camera that's got this level of zoom. And you're quite right. That can be conceived as a roadmap. That's a forward-looking manufacturing demand-based roadmap for the bill of materials. And it's so important. Grant, you're a very learned man. I'm curious whose advice on road mapping you listen to.
For me, Steve Johnson, my partner, has been one of my long-term mentors. I learned a lot about road mapping when I took pragmatic marketing. I actually had the ability to actually teach the road mapping course. And so Steve always is going to be one of those people who help me frame what I think and what I live. In today's age, I love you guys. Your podcast is a great way to do it, and I love the fact that it's always bringing other people in. What we do with our Friday product conversations on LinkedIn is always bring a panel of people in, because we've done 130 some of them. I have learned in every single one, right? New perspectives. I have much more understanding of BDC now than I ever did, because I have conversations with that. So I love how you guys bring this whole group of stuff into that. But I will also say that I'm a strategy first guy. So it is the Roger Martins and Richard Rummelts, almost in that I was what you have to have leading into to get to it. That was really gotten us there. And the roadmap, again, it's an output, it's a device. And so I love reading Gianna Basto's conversations on it as well. But there again, your stuff is probably where I get the most. Most of my read is strategy and business related stuff. Where product rating, most of what I get is from you guys. And you already did book me, so it was like that.
I mean, I'm thrilled to hear, but we do feel that, sometimes you can get stuck in the same echo chamber of the same experts, and you pick up the same feelings and thoughts from them.
Bruce McCarthy's book, I know there's multiple authors too. I know it is. Bruce's
absolutely,
book.
It's around here somewhere.
Tremendous. He's another person. It just popped in my head. But, it's a smaller group of people who I think, are helping have the conversation. And I think, as I said, I talk to Saeed on a regular basis. So, and obviously I talk with Steve on a regular basis. So there's people in my world that we have these conversations. I just had a conversation with Elliot Golden and some other people about this visual roadmap and sharing some examples how we've done that. So I that might be something I'm going to be writing on in the near term, just as we think about it, because it's much more on the strategic side of how do we do it. But place that I probably need to think more about than I have. And thank you for giving me this platform to think out loud.
It's a pleasure. I mean, this is why the channel's called Talking Roadmaps, Grant. It's great to hear, and I'm glad that we've been, a source of some useful knowledge and experiences as well. That's really pleasing. What road mapping resources do you recommend? And you've mentioned about Bruce McCarthy's book, which is personally one of my favorites on the road mapping. Is there anything else that comes to mind when you think about road mapping resources?
We've got some stuff that Steve has created on road mapping that I think has been really good. It's in our fundamentals of managing products. I think we have some available for free. If people are interested, reach out to me. I'll share what I can. Those are more video on demand type stuff. It's part of our bigger course. And maybe it's something that Steve and I should probably doing the whole course as a public doesn't work a ton well. We tend to work with teams, right? We want to help teams get alignment and clarity, not just in roadmaps, but in strategy and problem stories and everything they're doing. For us, the three most important things are alignment and clarity and strategy, in playbook and in roles. And so everything we do is normally working with a larger, maybe over 50 million. Once you start scaling a product management team, you've got multiple product managers. As soon as you have multiple product managers, that's where role clarity, playbook clarity, and strategy clarity become important because there's more people doing it.
Such a great point. I was just going to say there that around road mapping is that sometimes road mapping is, or road maps, I should say, is not as important when your company is small and the communication and, it's the team sizes of a certain size where communication is very fluid and happens very frequently. Like you said, once you start to get to a larger size, that's typically when I find that I start to work with clients because they've lost that ability to communicate and collaborate clearly with each other. And so they need some form of artifact to do that. So that's a really good point that you mentioned there.
And it's interesting. And I'm not sure when this is going to be released. This week in our product conversations, Cliff Gilley is going to be on with us, and we're talking about strategic planning for your product. And the reality is, road mapping and strategic planning for your product go together. And the most of the value is in the planning, not the plan. And so, road mapping, building the roadmap is where the most value comes. That's where you gain clarity with doing that. And so, back to the original point, I think that there's some stuff we could probably make available, whether it's through we do a webinar, we get some people accessing on demand stuff, just for specific to this. We'll figure that one out.
Yeah, incredible. And in fact, Grant, I'll give you an opportunity in a few moments just to pitch again to let our audience know what product growth leaders do, and yourself and Steve and the team. But before we get there, I'd just love to think about, and this can be one of the harder questions that we ask, but if you had to distill your philosophy, and I'll give you a little hint here, it could be in one or two words even, but if you had to distill your philosophy of road mapping into a couple of sentences, what would it be?
Market focused plan for the future.
Yeah, I think that's good. And we could wrap around that with the clarity and the alignment, which of course is what you said there. But I think the market and the focus is really important. Like we said, that's really the real impetus of a roadmap.
Well, and it gets back to the roadmap is market focused vision for the future, plan for the future. The road mapping is clarity and alignment. It's the doing of it.
Very cool. Yeah, I think that's a golden nugget right there, Grant. Well, look, I wanted to give you an opportunity to share with our audience how you can help them, how they can get in contact with you at Product Growth Leaders. So let us know what it is that you guys do and how you can help.
Steve and I at Product Growth Leaders, our focus is on helping product organizations achieve product success on purpose, intentionally. In the way we do this, and I said it earlier, is we've identified three keys, right? Clarity and alignment on strategy, clarity and alignment on roles, and clarity and alignment on playbook. We think that those three things, and they're all interrelated as we do that. So we tend to work with teams, product leaders in their teams, helping them gain clarity and alignment in their strategy. We've got basically two types of things we do. We call them learning programs, which is sort of our version of your typical product management training. But while we build capabilities, we also focus on getting stuff done. It's all applied. So every lesson, there's an assignment to apply it to your product, your market, whatever. So even though you're building capabilities over the program, you're also getting things done. And then we've got what we call intensive programs. Intensive programs where somebody's like, I've got a deadline, I've got a launch, I've got a strategy, I've got whatever it may be. I need help with it. Something they might normally have hired a consultant for, but if they hire a consultant does it, they don't build any capabilities. Next time it's do, they have to do it again. So for us, our intent is really about getting stuff done while building capabilities. So much more facilitated. In some situations, it's a 12-week, 90 minutes a week, just often for new product strategy where people are going through a process and learning and trying to build a business plan. It's been like that. We've done that way for product launch. But in some cases, we've done it as a 3-day workshop. Let's just get in the room and use whiteboards and whatever. And it's again, both the combination of building capabilities and getting stuff done, sort of where the special sauce comes. And that's what we do. Obviously, with Steve's background, we have our fundamentals of managing products is a great entry-level course for product management to do that. We also have a course called Principles of Product Strategy, which is really getting through that. How do we build the life cycle management of our, build this strategic plan for our product? And then the intensives range from product launch to roles to playbooks to a lot of different strategy ones, including road mapping.
Grant, that sounds fantastic. What we'll do is we'll put some links down below. If you're listening on the podcast, then go to the talkingroadmaps.com website. Otherwise, we'll put some stuff down in the show notes for those links. And maybe yours and Steve's LinkedIn profiles, just so that people can find you and just reach out.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll say is weekly, we do a thing called Product Conversations on LinkedIn. We put a question in on Monday, we put a poll in on Wednesday, and on Fridays we do a LinkedIn Live. We did a session with Rich Muirhouse a few weeks ago, which was we just did Rich. When did somebody like that? But normally we got 5 or 6 people, and we try to bring new voices in. So if you find Product Conversations, I'll get you a link for that. Pay attention to it. As people answer that are new, I try to get on the panel that week, just so we can bring new voices in. It's always rotating. So
fantastic. What a great resource, Grant. I think we'll definitely share that with our audience, and hopefully some of them listenership will already be taking part in that. If they're not, then we'll signpost them to you, because I think that sounds like a great opportunity, and one that I should probably get involved with as well, Grant.
We would love to do that. Let's do a talking roadmaps, product conversations crossover. Maybe we can do one together.
That sounds absolutely incredible. Well, look, Grant, all it leaves me to say is a massive thank you for spending time with us. I know that you and Steve are really busy helping product teams to be more strategic and intentional with it. I think that's such a worthy mission. But thank you for taking time out to share your stories with our audience. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you.
Justin, the pleasure has been mine. As I said, I geek out about talking about product and roadmaps. And I really appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation, and I look forward to more in the future.
Otherwise, Grant, all it leaves me to say is thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
Justin, thank you so much for the opportunity.